also because, as we've already mentioned, this is a new program that we started just a few years ago, so we really need any kind of boosting that we can get. So thank you very much for being with us today. And since this time is quite limited, in order to have time for questions as well, I suggest that we start. So, Professor Scotty.
And the topic of Professor Scotty is about, as you already have it here, it's about the EU and migration, and the very important thing, what are the real questions from a politician and from a scientist, especially and researcher. We want answers, but before you have answers, you should have the question posed. So, please, Professor Scotty.
Yes, thank you for inviting me. I apologize for my English, but I try to explain you very difficult matters now in Europe, difficult matters for politicians, for religious people, for the people in general, for the European society in context. Migrants and refugees floating into Europe from Asia and Middle East and South Asia have presented the European leaders and the policymakers with the greatest challenges since the financial crisis 2008. This is not the first wave of mass migration in the world. This flow of for migrants to Europe is a part of a vast and complex process of the redistribution of a population at the global level. The features of the models are different, depending on the different geographical area and causes of the phenomenon. Migration are created with the presence of men on Earth. It is a long time. Today, with the growth of a population in the world, have assumed an intensity and acceleration particularly intense for reasons that add up and go by the different rates of a population growth and the economy. The different effect of entirely degradation, and not least by the war, conflict, ethnic genocide, religious, cultural fighting. People emigrate. They flee from poverty and hunger, war, terrorism, and the consequence of violence of environment. It's a mix of reasons that add up and make it difficult to separate the individual reason, how often you try to do today with atrocious violence of women, children, men. This is a dramatic scenario that in front of your eyes, in your conscience, and in particular of those who exercise power, religious, political, economic, social. And university have the responsibility to exercise the delicate role of educating the young generation to face these challenges of planet movement, explaining the cause that generate that and thus require a systemic vision and action that are not limited humanitarian emergency and do not require political short time, but require global policy and global responsibility and a rather long time. Having in mind this scenario, today with you I will illustrate the European Mediterranean phenomenon. The International Organization for Migration calls Europe the most dangerous destination for irregular migration in the world, and the Mediterranean the world's most dangerous border crossing. Yet despite the escalating human toll, the European Union's collective response to its current migrant influx has been more focused on security, the bloc's borders, than on protecting the rights of immigrants and refugees. However, with nationalist parties ascending in many member states and concerns about Islamic terrorism looming large across the continent, it remains unclear if European Union or its member states have understood the size and duration of this migration epoch. The situation cannot be limited to the management of those escaping war, violence and hunger, as are shown in terrible images on the television. We must be aware that these migrations will change European, and that the European population and that from the fleeing countries will increase, as well as the rate of the economic growth reaching one conclusion. For example, which is the percentage of those who are Germans in Germany today, and what will be the percentage be in 30 years in the future. Let's try to understand better what is happening in front of us. First of all, where do these migrants and refugees come from? Political upheaval in the Middle East, Africa, and South Asia is reshaping migration trends in Europe. The number of illegal border crossing detections in the UAE started in 1992. 1,000 from Albania, that comes in Italy. In 2011, 1,000 of Tunisians started to arrive at the Sicilian island of Lampedusa following the onset of the Arab Spring. Sub-Saharan Africans who had previously migrated to Libya followed in 2011-2000, fleeing unrest in the post-Gaddafi era. The most recent surge in the tensions along the US maritime borders has been attributed to the growing number of Syrian, Afghan, and Eritrean migrants and refugees. The International Organization of Migration estimates that more than about 464,000 migrants have crossed into Europe by sea for the first 9 months of 2015. Syrians fleeing their countries, 4.5-year-old civil war, made up the largest group, 39%. Afghans looking to escape the ongoing war with Taliban rebels, about 11%, and Eritrean trying forced labor 7%, made up the second and third largest group of migrants respectively. Deteriorating security and grinding poverty in Iraq, Nigeria, Pakistan, Somalia, and Sudan have also contributed to the migrant influx. As can be concluded, refugees cannot be separated from migrants, as from the legislative point of view. So what is the difference between migrant and refugees? Distinguish migrants from asylum seekers and refugees is not always a clear-cut process. Yet it is a crucial designation because these groups are entitled to different levels of assistance and protection under international law. An asylum seeker is defined as a person fleeing persecution or conflict, and therefore seeking international protection under the 1950 first Refugees Convention on the status of refugees. A refugee is an asylum seeker whose claim has been approved. However, the UN considers migrants fleeing for war or persecution to be refugees, even before they officially receive asylum. Syrian and Eritrean nationals, for example, enjoy prima facie refugee status. An economic migrant, by contrast, is a person whose primary motivation for living his or her home countries is economic gain. The term migrant is seen as an umbrella term for all three groups. Europe is currently witnessing a mixed migration phenomenon in which economic migrants and asylum seekers are travel together. In reality, this group can and do overlap, and this gray area is frequently exacerbated by the inconsistent methods with which asylum applications are often processed across the UA 28 member states, which UA member states are on the front lines. European Union member states hardest hit by the economic crisis, like Greece and Italy and Malta, have also served as the main points of entry for migrants and refugees due to their proximity to the Mediterranean basin. Shifting migratory patterns over the past year have also exposed countries like Hungary, situated on the UA eastern border, to a sharp uptick in the irregular migration. Greece, by 2012, 51% of migrants entering the European Union illegally did so via Greece. This trend shifted in 2013 after Greek authorized enhanced border control under Operation Aspic, which included the construction of a barbed wire fence at the Greek-Turkish border. But by July 2015, Greece had once again become the preferred Mediterranean entry point, with Frontex reporting 132,000 illegal European border crossing from the first half of 2015, 5 times the number detected for the same period last year. Syrian and Afghans made up the lion's share of migrants traveling from Turkey to Greece, primarily to the Greek island of Kos, Chios, Lesbos, and Samos in the first 7 months of 2015. This most recent migrant surge coincided with the country's tumultuous debt crisis, which brought down its banking system and government this summer. Italy and Malta. The central Mediterranean passage connecting Libya to Italy and Malta was the most trafficked route for Europe-bound migrants in 2014. Frontex reported more than 170,000 illegal border crossings into Italy. In October 2014, the country's Mare Nostrum search and rescue program credited for saving more than 100,000 migrants, was replaced by Frontex Triton program, a smaller border control operation with a third of Mare Nostrum operating budget. In April 2015, European Union leaders tripled the budget for Frontex Triton border patrol program to 9 million euro a month, but refused to broaden its scope to include search and rescue. While the number of illegal border crossing into Italy for the first half of 2015 remained high, at about 90,000, the rising death toll, the International Organization of Immigration estimates that more than 2,000 people died along this route in 2015, and the deteriorating security situation in Libya have pushed many migrants to seek out alternative paths to Europe through Greece and the Balkans. 90% of migrants using this route in the first half of 2015 were from Eritrea, Nigeria, and South Africa. Hungary. A growing number of Syrian and Afghans traveling from Turkey and Greece through Macedonia and Serbia have made this European Union member state the latest frontier in Europe's migration crisis. A growing number of citizens from Kosovo traveling through Serbia also contributed to Hungary's migrant influx this year. From January to July 2015, Frontex reported that about 100,000 illegal crossings into Hungary. This surge prompted Prime Minister Viktor Orban to erect a barbed wire fence on the border with Serbia in July 2015. In April 2015, a public opinion survey found that 46% of polled Hungarians believed that no asylum seekers should be allowed to enter in Hungary at all. Standard migrants barred from boarding westbound trains effectively transformed Budapest Keleti station into a makeshift refugee camp in September 2015. What is the Dublin regulation? Entry point states bear unilaterally responsibility for migrants under the Dublin regulation. Revised in 2013, this European Union law stipulated that asylum seekers must remain in the first European country they enter, and that country is solely responsible for examining migrating asylum applications. Migrants who travel to the European Union states face deportation back to the European country they originally entered. This has penalized Italy and Malta in particular. Many policymakers agree that reforming the Dublin regulation is an important step to establishing a common European asylum policy. Under the current system, the burden of responsibility falls disproportionately not on entry point states with exposed borders. Malta and Italy have been heavily penalized in this matter. In practice, however, many of these frontline countries have already stopped enforcing Dublin and allow migrants to pass through to the secondary destination in the north or west of the European Union. Germany and Sweden currently receive and grant the overwhelming majority of asylum applicants in the European Union. What conditions do these migrants face in Europe? Migrant detection centers across the continent, including in France, Greece, and Italy and Malta, have all invited charge of abuse and neglect over the years. Many rights groups contended that a number of these detention centers violate Article 3 of the European Convention on Human Rights, which prohibits inhumane and degrading treatment. We used to think of migration as a human security issue, protecting people and providing assistance, says Brookings Institution Senior Fellow Khalid Koza. Now we clearly perceive or misperceive migration as a national security issue, and the risk of securitizing migration is that you risk legitimizing extraordinary responses. In Greece, the prolonged detention of migrants and asylum seekers, who are sometimes mixed in with the criminal detained, has elicited repeated sanctions from human rights groups. And in Hungary, a new series of emergency law adopted in September 2015 will allow its policy to operate detention centers in addition to making illegal borders crossing and hiding migrants punishable by prison time. The government also deployed armed troops to its border. Budget for migration and asylum issues in many of these entry point states hardest hit by the economic crisis have not kept up with growing demands and needs. In August 2015, the European Commission approved a €2.4 billion emergency aid package with €500 million earmarked for Italy and about the same €500 million for Greece to subsidize their migrant rescue efforts. For the next 6 years, however, many policymakers say that this fund still falls short of the growing magnitude of the crisis. In contrast, migrants in the richer north and the west find comparatively well-run asylum centers and generous resettlement policies. But these harder-to-reach countries often cater to migrants who have the wherewithal to navigate entry point states with the assistance and smugglers. This country still remains inaccessible to many migrants seeking international protection. How the European Union responded? As with the sovereign debt crisis, national interests have consequently won over a common European response to this migrant influx. Some experts say the bloc's increasingly polarized political climate, in which many nationalist, anti-immigrant parties are ascendant, in particular to blame for the muted humanitarian response from some states. Countries like France and Denmark have also treated security concern as justification for their reluctance in accepting migrants from the Middle East and North Africa, particularly in the wake of the Paris and Copenhagen terrorist shooting in early 2015. Underscoring this point, leaders of Eastern European states like Hungary, Poland, Slovakia, and the Czech Republic have all recently expressed a strong preference for non-Muslim migrants. In August 2015, Slovakia announced that it would only accept Christian refugees from Syria. Poland has similar focus on granting Syrian Christians asylum, and the head of the country's immigration office admitted to the financial debt. Applicants' religious background will have an impact on their refugee status application. And in Hungary, Prime Minister Viktor Orban has explained his anti-migrant policy in explicitly anti-Muslim language. While selecting migrants based on religion is in clear violation of the European Union's non-discrimination law, these leaders have defended their policy by pointing to their own constituency discomfort with growing Muslim communities. The recent economic crisis has also sparked a demographic shift across the continent, with citizens of its member states migrating to the north and the west in record number in search of work. And while the issues of intra-European Union migration has sparked anxiety over social welfare benefits in recent months, those who are coming from the Middle East and North Africa tend to provoke more heated political debates because of these issues of common cleavage and integration. By contrast, Germany and Sweden have unveiled some of the most generous asylum policy in the European Union. In September 2015, Berlin pledged 6 billion euros to support the 800,000 migrants, about quadruple the number from 2014. It was expecting to receive by the end of the 2015. If Europe fails on the question of refugees, warned German Angela Merkel, then it won't be the Europe we wish for. German officials also signed that the country was prepared to take 500,000 asylum seekers a year for several years. Similarly, Sweden's liberal asylum policy had spurred a dramatic uptick in application. Measured on a capita basis, the country granted refugees to the largest share of European applicants in 2014. Stockholm and previously announced that it would offer permanent residence to all Syrian applicants in 2013. Some experts say Germany and Sweden's open immigration policy also make economic sense, given Europe's democratic trajectory of declining birth rates and aging population. Migrants, they argue, could boost Europe's economics as worker, taxpayer, and consumer, and help show up its failed social safety needs. But other caution that European Union citizens might come to regard migrants as economic competitors, not contributors. What is the Schengen zone? The secondary movement of migrants who evade their first country of entry in clear violation of Dublin regulation have put enormous strain of the European Union's visa-free Schengen zone, which eliminated border control among 26 European countries. Considered one of the signature achievements of European integration, it has come under heightened scrutiny in light of the current migrant influx and attendant security concerns. In August 2015, Germany announced that it was suspending Dublin for Syrian asylum seekers, which effectively stopped deportation of Syrians back to the European country of entry. This must be the bloc's largest and wealthiest member country, was seen as an important gesture of solidarity with entry point states. However, German Chancellor Angela Merkel also warned that the future of Schengen was at risk unless all European member states did their part to find a more equitable distribution of migrants. Germany reinstated border control along its border with Austria in September 2015 after receiving an estimated 40,000 migrants over 1 week. Implemented on the eve of the emergency migration summit, this move was seen by many experts as a signal to other European member states about the pressing need for the European-wide quota system. Austria, the Netherlands and Slovakia soon followed with their own border control. This development have been called the greatest blow to Schengen in its 20-year existence. While Schengen rules allow member countries to erect temporary border control under exhausting public policy or national security circumstances, I believe that the fear that a sustained influx of migrants could spur more member states to suspend borderless travel for longer stretch of time is real. I suspect if the politics surrounding migration reality start getting messy, you'll see countries reintroducing internal border with greater frequency, which means they would have chiseled away at one of the main pillars of Europe, which is the free movement of people. What are the main proposals for managing the crisis? In September 2015, European ministers agreed to resettle 100,000 migrants as a small fraction of those seeking asylum in Europe, from Greece and Italy across 23 member states. Greece and Italy will not be required to resettle more migrants, and Denmark, Ireland, and the UK are exempt from European Union asylum policy under provision laid out in 2009 Lisbon Treaty. This plan was approved despite the vocal objection of the Czech Republic, Hungary, Romania, and Slovakia. This agreement builds up a previous voluntary quota system and called on member states to resettle 40,000 migrants from Greece and Italy over a 2-year period. Critics of this approach argue that the free movement inside the Schengen zone effectively nullifies national resettlement quota. In addition to taking a large number of asylum seekers, many experts say the European Union and global powers must also provide more aid to Middle East countries like Turkey, Lebanon and Jordan, which have borne the primary responsibility for Syrian refugees. According to the UN, 1.9 million Syrians have taken refuge in Turkey, 1 million in Lebanon, and 600,000 in Jordan since the start of the conflict in 2011. This influx has altered the demographic and economic of these host countries, which are not now struggling to provide basic food and shelter due to funding shortages. Since 2011, the United States has spent more than $4 billion on Syria humanitarian assistance, but has only given refugees to 1,500 Syrians. In September 2015, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry announced that the United States would accept an additional 10,000 Syrians in 2016 and an additionally 10,000 global refugees over the next 2 years. Some policymakers, like European Council President Donald Tusk, have called for asylum centers to be built in North Africa and the Middle East to enable refugees to apply for asylum without undertaking perilous journey across the Mediterranean, as well as cutting down on the number of irregular migrants arriving in Europe's shores. However, critics of this plan argue that the sheer number of applicants expected at such hotspots could further destabilize already fragile states. My friend asked for me to conclude. You have the paper inside. I arrive at the conclusion. We have the problems of a quota to redistribution in each country in Europe, and you have the problems of naval operation in the Mediterranean area, with all the problems, humanitarian problems that you see on the television. You see every day children and women die in the Mediterranean Sea. I think that we have to open the eyes and conclude that the migrants' problem is not problems of emergency. It's problem of long time. It's a change the geographic situation of the Europe and the EU. I conclude with a few words. Europe now it has 10% of global population. You think that in future this figure will be changed? The degrees of European population. And in Europe, the majority of people comes from immigrants. And this changed the culture, the life, the society, the European society. These are the problems that we are to face. I hope that in the university and international university will be object of research and studies to open the eyes of our citizens that are afraid by the Muslim inviting Europe. Thank you. I'm sorry.
Let me thank Professor Scott
Scotty for this lecture. Unfortunately, he just managed to come and he's leaving on the plane in very few minutes, an hour. So unfortunately, we don't have time for questions. He is our friend. He will be here probably very soon, and we'll have another chance to speak with him. And indeed, this lecture was very interesting, and I hope that you have certain conclusions by yourself on the basis.
You have a lot of figures.
Yeah.
You have to think over.
So
thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We do hope you continue discussing in your seminars.
Thank you, I'm sorry.
We managed to take
Лекцията прочетете.
Защо се тръгна? Ще е по-интересно с получение.
7 часа му е самолет.
Значи той трябва.
То не си да трябва да...
Трябва да...
Той дойде тук за половин час, имахме